Hey, welcome back everybody. In this video I'm going to show you how you can draw a car from reference, and I'm using digital tools like Photoshop. I'm using an XP pen, tablet pen, and display. So let's go ahead and get started here. And I'm going to do this one in real time so I can talk about it while I work. I'm also testing out my OBS to see if I can record myself while I'm drawing. So the first thing that I do is I typically start off with a box. I try to break the car down into a box, and the way I'm drawing this box is I'm trying to imply a two-point perspective, which means that if I were to extend the rays that are to the right of this vertical beam, they will eventually touch at some point, maybe off the canvas. And same thing for the rays that are pointing towards the left. At some point, they are going to intersect, and that might take quite some time here, but it will happen. So what I want to do is I want to divide the car up into thirds. The first part is going to be the front of the car, right? And then this will be the middle of our car, and this will be the back of our car. And if we look at the relative distances between the three, it looks like the middle section of the car is actually the longest part, and the front part of the car is kind of like the medium. So if I say long, medium, short, okay? So I've got this box that kind of approximates the perspective that you're seeing within the photo. The next thing I want to do is I want to divide the front into halves. And this will be important when we're adding some of the other features here. I'll draw bumper. So I'm just lightly sketching here, and I'm going to now extend upward to draw the windshield. Now this ray will also point back towards the same right vanishing point. And these cars have a little bit of a curve. We'll add the curves in later on. I'm just basically blocking out the shape. The back part over here. We'll draw the roof rack in later on. That's just like more of an accessory or more of a, detail that we can worry about later. So this is the basic structure of the car. I also feel like I need to maybe lengthen the door down a little bit. And again, matching that perspective is going to be super important. I'm trying to make sure that the angles that I choose are also the angles on the car. All right, so now that we have this in place, let's go ahead and establish the front and back doors. There's the back of the wheel well. And then we can see that the front wheel well starts over here, kind of curves in. And you might have to end up refining and adjusting the objects as you work. Okay, so we've got the basic framework of the car. Now I can start to add in our bumper. And I'm also going to put these lines here to kind of imply the wheel well. And we have a curved hood. So I will go ahead and draw a line indicating where the hood surface actually ends. Then I'll work back and add my curvature. Sometimes I find it helpful to rotate the canvas. On Photoshop, that's keyboard shortcut R. And then we have where the lights actually pop out. So I'm going to indicate that over here. drawing that box allows us to have a perspective, keep in mind perspective at all points of the drawing. Now this light here is a little bit wider than the light that's a little bit further away. And then there's a little bit of a curvature, and I'll just allude to that for the grille here. And then bumper, license plate. I can start to refine the shape. Again, at this point, I'm simply looking to make adjustments. I'm not worrying about making it perfect. I want the proportions to look believable and correct. And finally, what I want to do is I want to add the wheels. So let me just extend some lines down here, which is where the wheels are going to be. And this is going to be like the center of the wheel. So that's what these lines indicate. I'll draw a box for that too. Now, as we go towards the back of the car, the wheel is more elliptical. You'll also notice that the wheel, there's a little bit of distance between the wheel well and the back wheel. And these are essentially cylinders. You'll notice the same thing over here on the front wheel. It's a little bit hard to see in the photo, but that front wheel actually comes through something like this. And when you're drawing the actual wheels themselves from this angle, the rubber that's closest to the viewer is going to appear thicker than the rubber that's a little bit further away. Because usually wheels are a little bit tricky to draw. And then finally, I will draw the back wheel here. And it's okay if you make a few little mistakes. This is just the sketch stage. And now let's go ahead and indicate the roof rack. So we have some vertical bars here. Looks like there's a perspective. There's like a beam over here. There's another beam that juts out over here. And at this point, we can go ahead and put the luggage. Just look at the volumetric shapes. Think about volume as you draw. Can you visualize it in 3 dimensions? I'm not tracing. I'm simply observing and applying my knowledge of form. And making revisions and corrections as needed. So I've got the basic structure of the car here. Let's just indicate the interior, just a simplified version of the interior. We have a steering wheel. And it's a little bit difficult to see here, but our seats are back this way. So now I have the framework of the car. So this is like my starting point. I can check my proportions. I can add some details in here. I can make some refinements and adjustments. I notice that my proportions are a little bit off. If I look at where the grille and the bumpers touch, I could probably extend this down a little bit. But the big thing I'm looking for here is the car's structure pretty solid? You know, does it look like it has 3-dimensional form to it? All right, so now that I have that sketch in place, I'll just label this as sketch. And I'll duplicate that by hitting Command J or Control J on a PC. And let's hide our original sketch layer. Now, I'm just not simply trying to copy the reference. I'm using the reference as my guide. I want to have some fun with this, and I want to make it a little bit more stylized too. If I hit the Command T, Transform tool, what I can do, and I'll just zoom out a little bit here, the Command T keyboard shortcut brings up the Transform tool in Photoshop. And there are a few different attributes here that you can play with. Scale will make the object larger or smaller. Rotate will obviously do what rotation is supposed to do. But I'm most interested in perspective. And I can imply a third vanishing point by simply exaggerating the angle that I want. So in this particular case, it looks like I'm looking at the car head on, you know, just straight on. So if I were to exaggerate the top, that kind of implies a third vanishing point at the top, right? That could be kind of neat. Now if I hit Escape and I hit the Transform tool again and apply perspective, I can create some interesting distortion in this way. So when I'm bringing these edges in, I'm implying a third vanishing point. It's a little bit of a cheat, but it works. So you could you know, attempt to stylize it by determining whether or not you want to have a more of a worm's eye view or a bird's eye view by establishing a third vanishing point. So I think what I'm going to do is go back to something like this. That just looks a little bit more fun. And now what I'll do is I'll actually begin the inking process. And this is the process that I use for my own work. Some artists will go through and they'll refine the sketch and they'll make it even more detailed, and then they'll go ahead and ink. Everybody has their own way of working. Doesn't make one way right, doesn't make another way wrong. It's just basically how you feel most comfortable, right? So let's go ahead and start off. I usually like to start off with something small, kind of work my way through the drawing. I tend to also hop around a lot. And usually it's within the inking phase where I start to change up elements of the sketch to make it more my own. Now if I wish, I could use my head stylus, and that could be very useful when I'm trying to draw some straight lines. So I can go ahead and turn that on. And let's go ahead and apply some straight lines to the base of the vehicle. Switch to my brush tool. I find it better, or actually easier to work with, where I offset the head stylus a little bit away from the line that I actually want to draw. I'll just lower this a little bit. And you can turn it off when you don't need it. And there's certain things that I do prefer to freehand. I just don't want it to look so clinical and, you know, manufactured. I want it to have a little bit of an organic look to it. And undo is always a good thing to have laying around. Here I can add our rear view mirrors, side view mirrors. I think it's important for artists, you know, even if you might like to draw certain things like characters, to also be able to draw buildings, vehicles, etc. They may not be as fun, or they might appear to be intimidating, and they probably will be when you're first learning how to do something, but that's okay. You know, just more practice and eventually you'll get it. But the trick here is just being able to observe. Drawing is all about your ability to observe and interpret. We'll actually make this hang out a little bit more. Think about how all the pieces connect. You want form to follow function. And you gotta, you know, one thing that when you're learning how to do something, and I've just found this from my own experience, don't beat yourself up if it doesn't look great in the beginning. It's okay. The important thing is that you're recognizing that maybe something is off, and I think that's a really good skill to cultivate. Like if you are aware of something not working or something not being right, I think that is a good way of training. Even if you can't exactly execute on that, having the ability to look at something and say, you know what, I think something is off here, is actually a pretty good trait to have. Because eventually you will have the skill and you'll be able to do the thing that you need to do. There are a few different ways I can tackle this grill. Not super digging the precision here that I've got to do. I can find maybe another way. And I'll just leave that as is for now. That's a detail. So what about the wheels? There's so many different ways that you can handle wheels. You could freehand them. 9 times out of 10 I ordinarily do that. Sometimes it can be hit or miss. Lots of undos involved. And other times, if I get super frustrated, what I'll do is I'll just turn on my head stylus, and there's an ellipse tool. And the way this ellipse tool works is you can click, you can drag and alter the shape. You can adjust rotation. So here I'm just taking the two control points for the ellipse tool and I'm just conforming it to the shape that I want it to be at. So maybe that's my center. It can be a little finicky at times. There we go. Maybe widen that out a little bit. You can also move this axis over. I think I like that a little bit better. And this back wheel is pretty much blackened in. So we have our basic structure here. Draw the wheel wells. And now what we can do is we can turn off our pencil sketch and we can just see what we have to work with here. So I can take my ink layers and merge them in. So a pro tip that I would give you is if you are actually working on something like a complicated piece or a piece that you're having an area where you're struggling with, put the struggle on a separate layer so that way you can experiment and you can test things out and see if it's going to actually work before you commit. And then once you're happy with it, then you can merge the layers in. And in Photoshop, to merge layers, it's going to be selecting the two layers and then hitting Command E or Control E on a PC. I'm going to close these gaps. And now I can come back in and add whatever detailed elements I want to add. Now, knowing your keyboard shortcuts, I think, is a very, very important skill to develop, especially if you're doing the same thing multiple times. In my own workflow, I find it very convenient to have that muscle memory of knowing what keyboard shortcuts I want to use. I don't have every keyboard shortcut memorized, but you know, there are going to be certain things that you're going to be doing over and over again. And whatever that might be for your case, you may want to investigate, hey, does this have a keyboard shortcut associated with it? So here's a tool that I haven't used. I'm going to just try to play with this. This actually gives some curved lines. And I know the grill has some curvature to it. And again, maybe I'll just test this on a separate layer here. Maybe I'll start out at the middle. Let me just move this over. So now I've got the basics of the grill. then you want to add your own character to the car too. So I'll just put in some pockets of rust. I might come back in and say, all right, well, here's this little, whatever this is, some kind of a luggage. And inking is where you can really start to add some volume and some depth, give some interesting atmosphere and mood. Just want to make sure you close all your gaps, which I forgot to do. And so now we can go into cleanup mode as we ink. I can merge my layers in. The fourth wheel that we see in the reference photo, because I'm exaggerating the perspective here, you're not going to see that so much. And that's okay. And there's a body line that kind of extends from the back where this crease is. And I'll just kind of imply that over here. And then I want to think about texture, material, as I'm working through the drawing. And lastly, I can throw on some speed lines if I wish, or I can just draw a shadow. But this gives me something that I can actually play with. And I can take this version, now that I've got it more or less in place, I can hide my reference. This is my inks. I can make a duplicate version of this. Right, and I can play with the idea of, again, affecting my perspective, so I have something that has a little bit more stylization to it. So the key elements here are, when you're drawing a car, you want to start with a box that is in the proper perspective. Definitely use reference. I think references can help you out. And don't be afraid to stylize. Don't be afraid to exaggerate. The goal here is not to create a carbon copy of my photo, but it's to go ahead and create a believable resemblance or likeness of the car. Maybe I'm drawing a car in a comic book, or putting something into an animation. You can certainly have some fun with this type of stuff. So I hope you found this video to be useful. I'm trying the whole camera thing here. Let me know what you think of it, and I will see you in the next one.